Get this trash out of here
I am
before she
so
embarrasses
sorry.
us all. The billionaire
slipped.
husband sneers, his hand swiping violently at the silver tray in the maid's hands. Crystal glasses shatter against the marble floor, the sound slicing through the grand hall louder than the orchestra in the corner. Champagne spills in a golden arc, soaking the edge of her apron. The guests gasp for a split second, but the silence breaks into a wave of uneasy laughter. He stands tall in his tailored tuxedo, smug and untouchable. His wife, diamonds glittering at her throat, smirks at the display, her manicured hand clutching his arm as if mocking her were their favorite pastime. Around them, the glittering circle of the rich and powerful lean in, eyes bright with cruel amusement, their laughter swelling like a chorus rehearsed for moments like this. This wasn't a party anymore, it was a spectacle, and the target was standing in a soaked apron with trembling hands. The maid doesn't flinch. Her fingers shake as they clutch the edge of the tray, but her back straightens. She is black, her skin glowing under the chandeliers, her eyes holding more fire than fear. For a moment, her gaze lifts, and though the room believes they are seeing a servant humiliated, a different truth flickers in her eyes, a strength they cannot comprehend. "Don't just stand there," the wife snaps, laughter rolling off her tongue like poison. "Clean it up before someone important slips." She gestures to the shards as though the maid is less than the dirt scattered across the floor. A murmur stirs among the guests. Nervous chuckles. Someone lifts a phone, recording. Another nudges a companion, whispering, "She's going to cry." But the tears never come. The maid kneels, not in surrender, but in quiet defiance. Every shard of glass she picks up reflects her restraint, her silence. Around her, the glittering crowd indulges in cruel delight. "Imagine living like that," one whispers. "Imagine being her," another chuckles. Their laughter grows louder, bouncing off chandeliers and marble pillars, drowning the room in arrogance. Yet beneath it, a current shifts. Unease creeping into the edges of their joy. Her hands bleed faintly as a shard slices her palm, but she doesn't wince. Instead, she wipes the blood against her apron, eyes fixed forward, jaw tight. She will not give them what they want. The collapse, the tears, the submission. The husband leans closer, his voice dripping venom. Pathetic. "Some people are born servants, and that's all they'll ever be." His words strike the air like a whip, each syllable designed to wound deeper than any glass could cut. And then, silence. The kind that hovers heavy, thick with anticipation. The laughter lingers, echoing awkwardly before it dies out. The maid remains on her knees, gathering the last of the broken glass. Her dignity unbroken even as her body bends. From the shadows of the hall, the narrator's voice cuts through like a blade. They thought it was harmless mockery, but within moments their laughter would turn into stunned silence. By day, she scrubbed floors and polished silver until her knees ached, the smell of bleach clinging to her skin long after she left the mansion. By night, when the house was dark and her shift ended, she walked home under the dim streetlights, her shoes worn thin, her heart carrying both exhaustion and hope. At her small kitchen table, she would spread her nursing textbooks open, squinting at the words while her body begged for rest. She wasn't studying for herself alone. Every late-night page she turned was for her son, the boy who had grown into a man in uniform, serving overseas, fighting battles she could only imagine. Her life was not glamorous. It was survival stitched together with quiet courage. Rent was always just barely covered. Meals were stretched with creativity. She had known hunger, loneliness, and the sting of being invisible in a world that valued appearances over heart. Yet, even in those struggles, she carried herself with a dignity her grandmother had planted deep within her. Her grandmother, a woman of faith and fire, had once held her chin and whispered words that burned brighter than any insult she would face. Dignity doesn't shout. It waits, then it roars. That mantra had become her shield. When people looked down on her, when they laughed at her uniform or dismissed her presence, she let the words anchor her. Dignity was not loud. Dignity did not bend. Dignity endured. And then it rose when the time was right. She dreamed of more than survival. She dreamed of her son finishing his military service and stepping into a future that didn't carry the scars of poverty. She dreamed of buying a home where he could return, a place filled with warmth and pride instead of worry. She dreamed of finishing her nursing studies, not just to earn more, but to heal others, to prove that a woman society had tried to trample could still rise to serve with skill, knowledge, and compassion. Every insult hurled her way became fuel for those dreams. While her life was built on sacrifice, the billionaire couple's existence thrived on excess. Their days were woven with champagne mornings, business-class flights, and weekends on private yachts. For them, cruelty was a kind of performance art, entertainment dressed in designer suits. They laughed at the struggles of others as though the world were their stage and every lesser person a prop. They didn't just flaunt their wealth, they weaponized it, turning it into a shield that made them feel untouchable. At their parties, they displayed their riches like trophies. Imported cars lined the driveway, diamond necklaces sparkled under the chandeliers. Chefs served meals worth more than her monthly rent. To them, mocking the maid wasn't just about belittling her. It was a reminder to everyone watching of their supposed superiority. They thrived on humiliation, feeding on the discomfort of the room, disguising their arrogance as casual banter. Yet in their mockery, they missed something vital. They mistook silence for surrender, patience for powerlessness. They failed to see the storm brewing behind calm eyes, the strength carved into her spirit by years of struggle and sacrifice. The narrator's voice pierces the glittering illusion of their world, heavy with foreboding. One day, the maid's patience would be mistaken for weakness. That mistake would cost the rich more than money. The shards had barely been cleared when the mockery began again, sharper this time, as if cruelty itself had become entertainment. The billionaire husband raised his crystal glass high, the chandelier light scattering through it, and his voice carried across the grand hall like a whip. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever seen someone so determined to look important while being, well, absolutely nothing? He gestured broadly toward the maid, his lips curling into a smirk that begged for applause. She polishes silver as if it will buy her a seat at this table. Imagine that. A servant, dreaming she belongs among us. Laughter rippled through the guests, a rehearsed chorus of wealth-drunk voices. Some laughed hard, throwing their heads back, eager to show loyalty to the man who held power. Others laughed more softly, the sound brittle, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. They laughed because everyone else did, because no one dared to stand in silence. A handful glanced at the maid and then quickly away, ashamed of their discomfort. And then there were those who raised their phones, angling them slyly, capturing every second of humiliation to share later like gossip disguised as entertainment. The wife leaned against her husband, her diamond necklace shimmering like a weapon under the lights. She tilted her head, her voice smooth but sharp as glass. "Look at that uniform," she said with feigned pity. "So outdated. Who even wears something like that anymore? It's desperate, isn't it?" She paused, then added with a laugh that rolled over the crowd, "I almost pity her." She leaned closer to a friend dripping in pearls, her voice dropping just enough for the cameras not to catch, but loud enough for the room to hear. Almost. The laughter swelled again, harsher now, and the maid stood at its center like a statue carved of quiet resilience. Her tray shook faintly in her hands, the sting of the earlier cut in her palm pulsing against the handle. The pain was real, but she refused to show it. She moved among the tables with careful grace, each glass she placed down an act of defiance, every step a refusal to break. Her silence was not submission. It was strength measured, restrained. Guests whispered as she passed. "Why isn't she saying anything?" One man asked, his curiosity tinged with frustration. Another woman, sipping her champagne, smirked and replied, "Because she knows her place. She's smart enough not to talk back." But somewhere, hidden in the noise, a softer voice rose. A guest leaning into his companion, murmuring with unease, "Or maybe she's stronger than all of them put together." The couple didn't hear it, or perhaps they didn't care. They pressed harder, their cruelty emboldened by the silence of the crowd. The husband suddenly barked across the room, his voice booming like a gavel. "Speak up, maid. Tell us something clever. Or is silence the only trick you've mastered?" The words cut through the music, the clinking of glasses, the nervous whispers. The room froze. Eyes turned. Every face, painted with wealth and vanity, fixed on the maid. The cameras followed, hungry for her collapse. But she didn't flinch. She didn't stumble. She didn't give him what he craved. She met his gaze for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, her eyes steady, calm, and unreadable. The fire was there, though, burning low, controlled, waiting. The husband laughed too loudly, his sound breaking the stillness like a forced performance. He turned to his wife, patting her hand as if to reclaim dominance. "See, nothing," he said, smugness dripping from each word. "Born for servitude, destined for silence." A ripple of laughter followed, but weaker this time, forced, strained. Guests looked at one another uneasily, their smiles trembling at the edges. The cruelty was beginning to taste sour, bitter against the palate of the evening. A woman near the back lowered her phone, guilt flashing across her face. Another man swirled his drink, his brow furrowed as though reconsidering the price of his laughter. "Careful," a voice murmured from somewhere within the crowd, soft, almost swallowed by the hum of the orchestra, but clear enough to linger. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise you. The words hung in the air, fragile but unshakable, like a thread stretched tight across the room. No one turned to see who had said it, but the sentence wrapped around the moment, shifting it, unsettling the easy rhythm of cruelty. The maid continued her work, unbending. She placed the last glass on the tray with precision, her hand steady now despite the sting in her palm. Her dignity remained intact, stitched into every silent action. She did not lower her gaze. She did not apologize. She simply existed, fully, calmly, undeniably, and that existence unsettled the room more than tears ever could. The wife tried to salvage the mood, her laughter brittle. "Oh, darling, don't waste your time. She's beneath all of this." She raised her glass again as though to reset the room, to push the evening back into its careless rhythm. But the rhythm was broken. In the shadows of the hall, unease grew. Guests exchanged glances, uncertain now whether to laugh or to stay silent. Some still clung to their smiles, desperate to belong to the cruel majority. Others shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, their consciences stirring against their will. The billionaire couple, blind in their arrogance, mistook composure for defeat. They mistook patience for weakness. They mistook silence for emptiness. They didn't see the storm behind those eyes, didn't recognize the strength forged by nights of sacrifice, didn't understand that dignity, once cornered, had teeth. The music played on, soft and elegant, but the mood in the hall had changed. The laughter didn't come as easily. The jokes didn't land with the same force. The cruelty no longer seemed untouchable. The maid walked steadily through it all, her presence like a quiet drumbeat, her silence louder than any insult they could hurl. She carried herself with the weight of her grandmother's words pressed into her heart. Dignity doesn't shout. It waits. Then it roars. And though the room didn't yet know it, though the couple still basked in their illusion of control, the roar was coming. The billionaire husband's patience for silence wore thin. His smirk sharpened into a sneer as he stepped toward her, towering over the maid who stood poised in the glow of crystal chandeliers. The crowd followed him with their eyes, the orchestra's music softening into a hesitant hum, as though the violins themselves felt the tension. "Go on," he hissed, his voice carrying enough venom to hush even the laughter. "Say something smart for once. Or are you just good for scrubbing floors?" The wife's laugh rang out, brittle and cruel. "Careful, dear. Don't expect too much. Brilliance isn't bred in poverty." The guests chuckled nervously, shifting in their seats, their laughter like paper, thin, fragile, ready to tear. The maid stood still, her hands folded against her apron, her lips pressed into silence. Her eyes held no tears, no shame, only patience burning low like embers waiting for air. Then, suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung wide with a thunderous crack. The sound silenced the room in an instant. Every head turned, every camera lifted higher, and there he stood, a man in uniform. Not just any uniform, the crisp blues of a decorated soldier, medals gleaming under the chandeliers. The golden light caught on each emblem, each ribbon, a testimony to battles fought and victories earned. His boots struck the marble floor with a steady cadence, his presence commanding without a word. He didn't pause at the threshold. He didn't hesitate. His stride was purposeful, his eyes locked on the maid. The crowd parted instinctively as he moved, an invisible force shifting them aside. The smirks on the billionaire couple's faces faltered, confusion flickering into unease. The maid froze for the first time that evening, her composure cracking, not from shame, but from recognition. Her son. He reached her in moments, his arms wrapping around her in a firm embrace. For the first time all night her head bowed, not in humiliation but in relief. He pulled back, turned sharply to face the crowd, and raised his hand in salute. His voice thundered with reverence, each word heavy enough to shake the marble pillars. "To the bravest woman I know, my mother." The room erupted in gasps. Glasses slipped from stunned hands, champagne spilling across tables. Phones froze mid-recording, some trembling in their owner's grip. The orchestra stopped altogether, bows hovering above strings. Silence pressed against the walls like a storm about to break. The billionaire husband blinked, his smirk now twisted into confusion. His wife's hand clutched his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve, her diamond-studded confidence beginning to crack. The soldier stood tall, his gaze sweeping the crowd. His voice rang out again, steady and commanding. "You see a maid in uniform, but I see the woman who worked 2 jobs so I could finish school. The woman who studied by candlelight, who never once let me go to bed hungry, even when she did." He turned toward the couple, his stare sharp enough to cut through silk and arrogance. "You mock her silence, but it was her silence that gave me strength. Her patience, her resilience. Without her, there would be no soldier standing here tonight." The guests shifted uneasily, shame crawling across their glittering gowns and tuxedos. Phones that once recorded mockery now captured reverence, each lens trained on the mother and son. The soldier continued, his words rising in power. "I fought on foreign soil. I've defended this flag against enemies who sought to tear it apart. I've spoken in the tongues of allies and foes, French, Arabic, Spanish, bridging worlds because she taught me the value of learning, even when she had nothing. Every medal I wear belongs to her." He shifted into flawless French, then into Spanish, then Arabic, each phrase fluid and proud. The guests gasped, awed. What they had mocked as servitude now stood revealed as sacrifice, wisdom, love, the foundation of greatness. Whispers filled the hall. "That's her son. Decorated? He speaks all those languages?" The awe spread like wildfire, overtaking the laughter that had once filled the room. The soldier's gaze softened as he turned back to his mother, his voice dropping to a reverent tone. "She gave everything so I could stand here in this uniform, and tonight you tried to strip her of dignity. But you cannot strip what was never yours to take." Applause broke the silence, hesitant at first, then roaring, a tidal wave crashing against the arrogance of wealth. The crowd rose to their feet, some clapping with tears in their eyes, others with shame etched across their faces as they joined in. The billionaire couple's smirks withered completely, their eyes darting around the room, desperate for control they no longer held. The maid, still standing tall, finally lifted her chin. Her voice, quiet but cutting through the noise, carried across the hall. "Respect is the only universal currency. And tonight, you've proven yourselves bankrupt." The words struck like thunder. The applause swelled louder, guests rising higher, cheers echoing against the vaulted ceilings. Phones captured every second, immortalizing the line that would soon flood the internet. The couple's faces twisted, desperation hidden behind weak laughter. The husband tried to chuckle, raising his glass once more. "Ah, come now, it's all in good fun." But no one laughed. Not a single guest joined him. The room had turned. Their empire of cruelty had collapsed in the span of minutes, toppled not by wealth or wit, but by the quiet dignity of a mother and the resounding honor of her son. The soldier placed a protective arm around his mother's shoulders, guiding her away from the shards of glass that had started the night. Each step they took was followed by applause, every clap a nail in the coffin of arrogance, every cheer a hymn to dignity restored. The billionaire couple remained standing at the center of the hall, stripped of power, their wealth unable to shield them from the truth that now echoed louder than any insult. They had mocked the wrong woman, and the world was watching. The applause thundered long after the soldier's words faded, echoing against the marble pillars until it felt like the very walls rejected the arrogance that had poisoned the room. The billionaire couple stood stranded at the center of the storm, their smiles brittle, their once commanding presence now nothing more than a hollow performance. Guests who had clung to their every word minutes earlier now turned their backs. Conversations shifted in low, sharp tones. Investors leaned into one another, murmuring about image and damage control, their eyes cutting toward the couple with suspicion and disgust. The power that had once wrapped itself around them like a velvet cloak slipped away thread by thread. Phones continued to record, but not for their benefit. Every angle captured the maid standing tall beside her decorated son, the image of dignity reclaimed. On social media, those recordings would soon become proof of arrogance unmasked, a humiliation not suffered by the maid but by those who had mocked her. The billionaires had wanted an audience, and now they had one, only not the kind they had expected. Then, from the edge of the room, a figure stepped forward. The man was older, his chest adorned with medals that mirrored the soldier's own. An influential general, one whose name carried weight in both military and political circles. His voice cut through the murmurs with the authority of a man who had led armies and shaped nations. "Any son raised with this kind of dignity," he declared, his gaze sweeping the room, "deserves our support, and so does his mother." The crowd roared with approval, applause rising again like a tide. The general stepped closer to the maid, taking her hand gently. "Madam, the strength I see in your son was forged by your sacrifice. You are not invisible. You are invaluable." Tears filled her eyes then, not from shame but from recognition. For years she had carried her burdens in silence, her dreams hidden beneath the weight of survival. And now, in the grandest hall of the wealthy and powerful, her worth was acknowledged, her dignity honored. The billionaire couple shrank into themselves, their glittering clothes suddenly gaudy, their diamonds no longer dazzling but desperate. Guests passed them without a glance, some whispering harsh judgments under their breath. "Disgusting behavior," one muttered. "I won't be doing business with them again," another said flatly. The empire they had flaunted was collapsing in whispers, cracks spreading faster than even they could patch. Later that night, when the hall had emptied and the applause had faded into memory, the maid sat at her small kitchen table once more. This time she wasn't alone. Her son sat across from her, his uniform jacket folded neatly on the chair beside him, his presence filling the room with pride. Her trembling hands held the phone as she dialed a number engraved in her heart. Her mother's voice, warm and weathered, answered on the second ring. "It's done," she whispered, her throat tight. "They mocked me, but tonight, they listened." There was a pause, then the soft, steady voice of wisdom that had carried her through every trial. "You didn't just win, child. You made them listen, and that is worth more than any jewel or coin." The tears came freely then, not of pain, but of release. She had endured, she had been tested, and she had emerged not only with her dignity intact but with the truth of her worth spoken aloud for the world to hear. By dawn, the world had already begun to echo her victory. Clips of the confrontation spread across social media like wildfire. Headlines blazed across screens. "Billionaire couple mock Maid. Her soldier son shuts them down. Respect is the only currency. Maid's powerful line goes viral. Arrogance exposed in high society gala." The couple's carefully curated image, built over years of lavish parties and ruthless business deals, crumbled in hours. Investors withdrew. Charities distanced themselves. Their names, once synonymous with wealth and power, became shorthand for arrogance and disgrace. But for the maid, everything had changed in a different way. She was no longer just the silent worker in the corner of the room. She was the woman whose dignity had stood taller than diamonds, whose patience had humbled the powerful, whose story had inspired millions. She was no longer invisible, and as she sat at her table with her son's hand wrapped firmly around hers, she knew her grandmother's words had finally come to life. Dignity had waited, and at last, it had roared. The days that followed turned a private humiliation into a global reckoning. What had begun as a glittering gala became a parable of arrogance undone by dignity. The maid, once invisible in her uniform, found herself at the center of conversations in boardrooms, classrooms, and living rooms across the world. Clips of the confrontation spread like wildfire. The moment her son saluted her, the instant she delivered her unforgettable line, "Respect is the only universal currency, and tonight you've proven yourselves bankrupt," was replayed on news outlets and shared across every social media platform. She could have hidden from the spotlight, retreating back into quiet life. But she didn't. Instead, she chose to rise. With her son's encouragement, she used the attention not for herself, but for others like her, single mothers carrying the weight of 2 lives, families stretched thin by sacrifice, women who had been silenced or overlooked. Within weeks, she announced the creation of a foundation dedicated to supporting single mothers and offering scholarships for military families. The mission was simple yet powerful: to turn silence into opportunity, to ensure dignity was never mistaken for weakness again. Donations poured in, not just from philanthropists but from ordinary people moved by her story. Her own dream of finishing nursing school, once a quiet goal tucked between work shifts and exhaustion, became reality. Universities offered her scholarships, hospitals extended opportunities, but she accepted only what allowed her to continue serving others. "This isn't just about me," she told a reporter. "It's about every person who's been told they are less. We are not less. We are more than they can imagine." While her life blossomed, the billionaire couple's empire withered. Branded online as arrogant elitists, their names became synonymous with cruelty. Invitations that once filled their calendars dried up. Partners pulled away. Deals collapsed under the weight of bad press. Even those who had laughed alongside them at the gala scrambled to distance themselves, pretending they had never joined in the mockery. Their faces, once celebrated in magazines, now appeared beneath headlines of disgrace. Wealth could buy many things, but it could not erase the stain of humiliation broadcast to millions. The hosting venue, stung by its association with the scandal, issued a statement within days. "We will no longer tolerate any form of disrespect towards staff or guests." Effective immediately, a zero-tolerance policy for disrespect is in place. For the first time, rules were not written to protect the wealthy but to shield those who served them. Other establishments quickly followed, pledging reforms and revising codes of conduct. The ripple was small at first, but it grew, carried forward by the sheer power of her story, and the world listened. Hashtags surged across platforms: "Respect is currency" and "Silent strength." Millions joined the conversation, sharing their own experiences of being overlooked or demeaned. Students quoted her line in classrooms. Leaders cited it in speeches. Mothers whispered it to their children as a lesson in dignity. What had been a moment of shame engineered by the powerful became a movement of pride fueled by the powerless. For the Maid, now more than a maid, it was never about fame. Her joy came not from the headlines or the praise, but from the calls and letters she received daily. A young mother who found courage to pursue education. A soldier who said her son's words inspired him to honor his own family more deeply. A child who said, "You make me proud of my mom." Her grandmother's wisdom had proven true. Dignity had waited. And when the world tried to laugh it away, it roared loud enough to change lives. They mocked her uniform, forgetting respect isn't stitched in fabric. They laughed at her silence, not knowing silence can thunder louder than any insult. And in one night, their empire of arrogance collapsed, while her dignity rose like a banner of victory for the whole world to see. This was more than a moment in a ballroom. It was a reminder carved into memory. Respect cannot be bought, traded, or worn like a jewel. It is not measured in wealth or influence. True power belongs to those who endure with grace, who rise with dignity, who carry themselves with quiet strength even when mocked by the mighty. That is a currency no billionaire can counterfeit, no crowd can devalue, and no insult can erase. Her story is every mother's story, every worker's story, every soul who has been underestimated, dismissed, or mocked. And her triumph is proof that when dignity roars, it cannot be silenced. If you believe dignity speaks louder than wealth, share this story. Subscribe for more tales where respect conquers arrogance.